Welcome to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. I'm your host, Stacey David. This podcast is brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road is their slogan, and they supply the parts to help you do that. Also, Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals and hot rods and enthusiasts alike. If you want quality tools, Cornwell's the place to go. Let's get to it. Hey, we're hanging with my buddy Malcolm Pritchett here today. He owns West Kentucky Collision Center in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Been in the collision business for what, 30 years now?
34.
34 years, man. That's a lot of dents you've pulled.
A lot of dents, a lot of paint.
What is the biggest change that you're seeing over the last, say, 5 to 10 years?
Water has become more prevalent.
Yeah, waterborne paints.
Waterborne paints. You know, of course, we put solvent clears, but they're working on waterborne clears. Nobody has it perfected yet, but you know, things usually come around full circle. And 34 years ago, we were spraying a lot of lacquer, and then we were, what's happening now and what happened to lacquer, the kind of revolution there is similar. We were spraying lacquer and clear coating the lacquer, and then they came out with, and you talk about the Imron, that was a polypropylene.
I know what you're talking about. It'd kill you.
Well, yeah, it was. It wasn't.
It's sweet poly purebred is what it was. You don't breathe that stuff. What the heck?
I can remember.
Stuff would kill you, man.
Well, I painted an airplane one time with it, the Amaron, you know, and that's what it was, trucks and airplanes and stuff like that. And do you hear about Billy Gibbons talking about cowgirls floating across the ceiling? Yeah, he must have been painting airplanes when he, wrote that. Yeah, it's not good for you, but it took the clear, the lacquer-based clear, and turned it into this acrylic era of paint, and that was a game changer. And you know, for show cars to just regular and production cars, it was easy to spray. You could get stellar results out of it, you know, a whole lot easier.
What's the biggest misconception that you think people have when they bring their car in to have it fixed or repaired at a body shop?
They have no idea not only the time and the skill level it takes. When I first got into it, body men were revered.
Yeah.
And then they were kind of thought of to be, you know, alcoholics and, you know, deadbeats. You know, and now it's coming back full circle.
You find people treat you with respect when they come in, or do they come in kind of expecting to get ripped off? So they're kind of
a little bit
careful.
A little bit of both. Yeah. I mean, you know,
that's a bad approach too.
We're in the we're in the car business, whether we like it or not. You know, there's so many people that give the car industry as a whole, whether it be car salesman to the lube guy.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's great. And then there's shysters, and you've got everything in between that runs the gamut. And the few make it hard for the guys out here that are really working hard and really care about people. And one thing, you can't fake body work. I mean, if you don't care about it, if you don't love it, if you're not really sleep and eat and breathe it at one point in your career, you need to get out.
It's not a get-rich-quick thing.
No, it's not. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dedication, and people don't realize, you know, the time for one it takes, you know, and also the skill level. It's just like playing a piano or a guitar or doing anything. Before you get good at it, you got to be really crummy at it, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, another thing that people don't realize is that you have to keep up on it. There's new products coming out all the time. That's why we cover products on the show and different techniques. I mean, you've got to be learning all the time.
All the time.
The knowledge you had before is great, and you can still apply that, but there's new body working techniques. You know, the thickness of the metal now is so thin, you don't do the same metal working techniques on newer cars. You can't.
You know, and then we've got aluminum and composites.
You got to keep up on your welding skills. You got to keep up on everything.
You talk about welding skills. You know, when I started, we oxyacetylene our plug welds.
With a piece of coat hanger.
Well, sometimes.
A lot of guys did that.
Yeah, I was one of them.
Free metal.
When we were doing that, I mean, I thought I'd never learn the technique. I had some really kind people that were very talented and very kind to me and showed me a lot. I thought I'd never get it down, but I got it down. By the time I got really good, well, here comes the MIG welders. Okay, so then we go, you know, another 10, 15, 20 years through the MIG welding years, and now they've got resistance welds. You know, if you got the money, you can have a resistant and make it just look just like from the factory.
Spot weld,
and of course, that's the name of my game. I'm in the collision repair business.
Yes.
So it is to make it look like it never happened.
Yeah. And see, that's a different world than the restoration business. A lot of people don't realize that. You know, it's a different skill set, it's a different mindset, and I bet you run across that a lot, don't you?
A lot.
I know that there's a lot of body shops that are collision shops. They will not take on a restoration job.
Will not.
They don't have the personnel, they don't have the tools, they don't have the patience.
It's getting harder and harder to find somebody to take on and work on an older model vehicle,
Sure.
Much less do an all over paint job. Those things are going by the wayside, and eventually it'll get to be where if you don't know somebody.
That's why we encourage people to try to learn the skills themselves.
And that's why I watch your show.
Well, thank you. Yeah. But no, that's important, man, because, for example, okay, say a guy comes into you and he's had his car damaged and there's a little bit of body work, but he wants a color change, a paint job. People don't realize how expensive materials have gotten. Just give me a basic, if you're doing just a color change with a new paint job on a vehicle. Say somebody's stepbrother has a Camaro, he wants to change the color. Well, what's a basic cost?
Well,
$5 grand? $6 grand?
it's more like 10.
10 grand. And that's minimal body work.
That's no body work.
That's pulling off a color change in the door jambs and all those areas.
Taking it completely apart and everything. If you got a Camaro and it's red and you want a black Camaro, go buy a black Camaro.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to fork out the bucks to do a custom color and you just have to have it. I hope you either have a pocket full of money or, first name basis with your banker.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
It is, and it's good for people to hear that and realize, what they're facing. That's a major part of any project that somebody's taken on is the final paint job, whatever they want to do. Even if you're going to wrap it, even the guys that are doing the rat rods, if you do all the nice patina, man, that starts to add up too, because you're still putting custom paint on there.
Well, and when materials in general are so expensive in our industry, the good stuff, it runs the gamut, and
you guys primarily do PPG, correct?
We are a PPG shop, and it's more than just the product. I always go back to PPG because I know these folks.
Ron Payton, he and I created most of these colors, the Copperhead color, Sergeant Rock color. We've done a lot with PPG.
I can't say enough good stuff about Ron. I had been doing body work when I met Ron probably 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And when I met Ron, it was a game changer.
Yeah.
Because he took me and not only showed me some the kind of tricks of the trade, so to speak, but he actually showed me how to be a professional, how to keep my tools. I mean, man, you look through my toolbox, it was a wonder I could even find anything.
So you were that body guy.
I was that body guy. Still can't find my 10mm socket.
I think I found one of those laying around here somewhere. I have a big collection of 10mm sockets.
Yeah, I do too. But Ron, he was just a game changer in my career. I can't thank Ron Payton enough for what he's done for me.
So if you could go back in time and do anything you want, would you still be a body guy? Would you have taken the same path? Now looking back, now that you are seasoned?
I wasn't doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
When I met my wife, my beautiful wife, I got to take that in consideration and all the wonderful people that
Oh yeah. You can't even imagine it a different way.
I can't.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I can't.
Because not everybody can do that. There's a lot of people that get to a certain point in their life and they're like, I got so many regrets. I wish I'd have done this and this and this, and that's a bad place to be.
I don't have any regrets.
That's a bad place to be.
I've enjoyed it. It's been a fun ride.
So what's your next project?
I've got a 68 Chevrolet 4-wheel drive pickup truck. It's a retro mod.
Nice.
That you had it on your show.
Oh yeah, that orange one. That's a nice truck.
Yeah, and I'm getting close to being done with it. There's a veterinarian that I'm building a 71 Chevrolet pickup truck for in Hopkinsville. I'm working on that. But once I get those done, I'm really looking into the cars that I never had or always thought that were out of reach.
Yeah.
And the market is so soft. I've never seen a better time to go out and buy a sports car in my life.
Yeah.
Who knows what I may drive up in.
I look forward to seeing it, man. That's going to be awesome. There was a time when the Mercedes and BMW and Jaguars and stuff, those were high dollar cars. And now the mentality has changed where you can pick those things up cheap. And they're great cars.
My youngest son's driving a 318 right now.
Yeah, most of them don't have any miles on them. And they were high miles cars anyway. You could take those things 200,000 miles, no problem.
I think he's got like 130,000 on, 230 on his.
Take care of them, man. They'll run great. Yeah. See, everybody wants trucks now. Everybody wants that kind of thing.
Trucks and SUVs, yeah.
One of the big challenges that faces restorers out there today, is finding good quality original parts. And there's a lot of places out there that carry custom parts, but finding those original parts can be very difficult. And that's one of the reasons you hear me talk about LMC Truck all the time. Because if you're doing a truck project, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, doesn't matter what year, they carry everything, they have got the parts, those little screws and those nuts and those little fasteners that you can't find anywhere, you can find at LMC. So if you have a project, even if you're not working on a truck, but you might need some hardware or something, you know, that is Ford, Chevy, or Dodge related, you need to have an LMC catalog, because I guarantee you, they got something that you can use. You know, people ask me all the time what I think about the auction shows, Barrett-Jackson and all those kind of things. And, you know, I don't really have a problem with the auctions themselves, but what I do have a problem with is the influence that they're putting out in the automotive industry. You have a lot of people that sit there and watch those, and they naturally make the connection to whatever they might be working on. So if they see a Chevelle go through for $70,000, they think their Chevelle's worth that, whether it sells or not. And they don't know exactly what went into that car. That's just human nature. So, I mean, all the time, it's almost a daily thing when I'm out around people, somebody will come up and go, hey, you know, I've got a Camaro. You know, I saw one sell on Barrett-Jackson for this, so that's probably what it's worth. And doing that kind of math work that's fuzzy math, big time. You can't do that. And I've noticed an influence in the industry where now, instead of people going up and saying, that's a really cool car, how fast is it and how well does it handle, which is what I grew up with, now people walk up to a vehicle and go, what's it worth? That's a real complete change in the mentality of a car person. The thing you have to understand is that car people build things out of passion. You don't necessarily build them to make money out of them. If we become an industry that's all about just making money, then we lose the passion and we just become a bunch of used car salesmen. This industry will not sustain that because somebody has to be passionate about it. You know, that's what drives the music industry, that's what drives the television and film industry, and it's what drives the car industry. So if you want to watch the auctions, fine. Just don't think it's real life. They are TV shows. Not everything on TV is real, except on our show, of course. Next question we got here is a really good one. This comes from Robert. And first of all, he says, cars and guitars, totally my world. That's awesome. You must be a guitar guy, man. I'd like to know what you got. Anyway, on to his question. He says, when you're installing the floating housing mounts for ladder traction bars, in other words, the traction bars that bolt on that are ladder bars, do the traction bars need to be welded to the axle housing, or can they be bolted on with U-bolts? And he's working on a 65 Chevy II. That's a really good question, Robert. The traction bars that you're talking about, those bolt-on style, like from Lakewood or whatever, those have been around for a long time. And those bolt-on ones really don't work that well. And here's the reason. And I'm talking about the ladder bar that actually bolts onto the axle housing with a U-bolt. An axle housing, when you put power to that rear axle wants to rotate. And the only way to keep it from rotating is to weld a flat flange onto that axle housing that holds the leaf spring, if we're talking a leaf spring suspension. And then the leaf spring bolts to that flange, and that's what keeps the axle from rotating, hopefully. Now, in a leaf spring situation, you get axle wrap, it overpowers the leaf spring and bends it the wrong way into kind of an S shape. Now, obviously, the spring doesn't like that, so it snaps back into shape as soon as it can. So there's a tremendous amount of torque on that axle. Now for a coil spring suspension, you have a coil spring which does nothing to hold, you know, the axle from rotating. So to compensate for that, you have link bars, 4-link, 3-link, you know, struts, whatever the suspension is, that keeps the axle from rotating. And those brackets are also welded to the axle. So something has to keep that axle from rotating. Now when you bolt one of those ladder bars on there, you cannot get those U-bolts tight enough to keep that thing from rotating. So even if you put it, most people will use these with a leaf spring suspension, the leaf spring is still going to want to wrap. This might help a little bit because you're adding a little bit more tension with those U-bolts, but ultimately they're going to slip. If you really want the traction bar to work correctly, it needs to be welded to the axle housing. And if you're not a welder, you need to go someplace where somebody knows how to weld an axle housing, because you can warp an axle housing if you get it too hot. If you really want a ladder bar to work correctly, it needs to be firmly mounted to the axle housing, and it keeps that axle housing from wanting to rotate. Any of the stuff that you get from Art Morrison, any of the stuff that you get from like TCI or Fat Man's, any of those real 4-link suspension kits where you have the bracket that's welded on, those are the real deal. The other stuff is just kind of for show. Actually, a slapper bar works better than those bolt-on ladder bars that you're talking about. They look cool. I remember back in the day, man, we all had them, and they were painted yellow, so when you drove down the road, you could see that ladder bar, and it was like, oh man, that car's awesome. until you stomped on it, you got wheel hop all the way down there, and it's like, dude, what's up with your axles? Well, I don't know. It's because the ladder bars aren't doing anything. You know, you hear me talk about tools a lot, and there's a reason for that. Because we couldn't do what we do as car guys without tools. And we always need quality tools. And I always encourage people to find the best quality tool that you can. And for me, you know, after years of doing this, decades now, I haven't found anybody better than Cornwell Tools. And they've been in business for 100 years. So obviously they know what they're doing. They continue to push forward in their tools and their boxes. They continue to push forward in new technology. I'm always eager to see what they come out with, and I will recommend them many times to you guys. There is a difference between buying something American and buying something that's an overseas imitation. And you guys that are car guys and tool guys, you know what I'm talking about. So check them out, Cornwell Tools. You won't be disappointed. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, you know, if you really crank those U-bolts down, I bet it wouldn't slip. Let me give you a little story that happened to me that shows you what kind of rotational forces are on a rear axle. We had the opportunity to spend some track time with Mario Andretti, and I had a truck that was coming in that had already been lowered and modified by some other people, and they wanted me to do some engine stuff on it, which we did on the truck show. I think I put a supercharger on it, so this thing was ready to go. And so on the way out to the track, you know, I wanted to wring this thing out a little bit, so I launched it from a stoplight, and that rear end went all kinds of crazy on me. I mean, it was just thumping and banging back there, and I'm like, what the heck have I done? So I get over to the racetrack, and Mario Andretti's about 30 minutes from showing up. I crawl into the truck, and the differential is standing almost straight up. The fact that it did not break the U-joint or pull the drive shaft out of the train, I don't know how it didn't, but the differential's standing up. And what happened is that flange, that spring pad that's welded to the axle, the welds broke because of the torsional twist on that axle. So now I got 30 minutes to get this axle straightened back up and get it welded on. I have no tools. I'm sitting here at the race shop. So we jack the thing up, I crawl into there, we unbolt the rear axle, I start banging stuff around. A guy had a little BuzzBox welder there. We were hoofing it, man. And literally I get that thing welded back together, and it's one of those, we didn't even have a welding mask. I'm just holding up one of those shields, you know, trying to put a bead on this thing up on top of the axle, trying not to set the thing on fire because you're all around the gas tank. And literally, I got it done about 5 minutes before Mario Andretti shows up. He walks in, you know, I'm all sweaty and covered with grease and everything. He had to be thinking, who the heck is this guy? So we take the truck. Now we have to drive the truck out on the track, you know. So I'm not saying a word about this. I'm just praying that this rear end is going to stay in place. And it did, and we had a good day with it. But that was one of those deals where it was a real reminder on what kind of torsional twist there is on that rear axle. So you really have to, when you start messing with that, especially when you're adding more power, and if you're really going to lay into it, you have to make sure your welds are good, and you have to make sure that your traction bars are where they need to be, or you will blow those things off of there. Keep in mind, this podcast is made possible by our friends at LMC Truck and our friends at Cornwell Tools. All right, that wraps it up for us today. It is time for you to get out there, start working on something, build something with your own two hands, send in your questions, send in your pictures, let us know what you're working on. All right, we'll see you later.